Hello, everyone. It's good to have you. Good to have you all here this morning, and great to see this this conference, growing and getting so large. I'm Bill Cilluffo. I'm a partner with QED Investors. I lead our international investing, which probably is 2/3 Latin America. So, this is a huge part of what we do and what I spend our time on. We are an early stage fintech boutique, so invest in really only fintech, prop tech, some related things. Tend to focus on pretty early stage investing. Series A is mostly the occasional seed, the occasional Series B. We've got 16 investments in Latin America, 6 here in Mexico, and are always looking to do more. David?
My name is David Vélez. I'm the founder of Nubank. We are a digital bank based out of Brazil, where we started in 2013, and we are in the early stages of launching here in Mexico, hopefully over the next few months, and are just generally very excited about the financial service opportunity in Mexico and other Latin American countries beyond Brazil.
And we actually got our start in Latin America by working with David. So, QED has known David for, what do you think, a decade?
Hey, more or less, yeah.
And, we weren't smart enough to come in on his first fundraising round, but thankfully we corrected that quickly.
Yeah, you guys came right after, so it worked out well.
Great. So today the topic is, I guess the official topic is unicorns in Latin America. I'll probably broaden it a little bit, both talking about unicorns, the most impressive of which is sitting to my left. But also, it's just been a really impressive hot time to watch Latin America grow over the 5 years that we've been part of it in the tech scene. You've seen, some very high-profile private companies like Nubank. While Rappi is not directly fintech, they've definitely got fintech components to it. You've seen a number of others like, Creditas, Confio, Clip, that are well on their way to being unicorns. You see some really impressive prop tech companies, that are approaching, unicorn status and have significant fintech components to it. So it's been a really exciting and busy time and really thrilling to watch Latin America. And so we've got a few topics that David and I are going to talk about related to that for maybe 15, maybe 20 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to the audience to ask us any other questions, hopefully on that subject, but I'm sure we'd be willing to deviate a little if the audience has interest. So why don't I start by asking David a question? I mean, you obviously know how hot the market's been over the last couple years or so. Clearly, you're a big piece of both making that happen and benefiting from it. Why do you think it's happening? Sort of why now, and why are we seeing this, this environment in Latin America right now?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at Latin America and you look at a disaggregation of industries and sectors, or even when you look at what are the biggest companies in Mexico, what are the biggest companies in Brazil, what are the biggest companies in Colombia and Argentina, financial services is always number one. It's people always say that when people think about Brazil, they're thinking about commodities, they're thinking about Petrobras. You actually look at what are the biggest companies in the Bovespa, there are 5 banks. And so from a market size perspective, it's not surprising that there is a very interesting opportunity in financial services in the region. So I'd say from a market size perspective, that would be the first place to take a look. The second one is when you go deep and you actually look at the structure of these markets, you find that in every single Latin American market, 5, 6, 7 banks own 85, 90% of everything. Right, in Brazil, 5 banks own 85% of all the lending, of the credit cards, all the deposits, all the insurance. These are very powerful oligopolies, very, very powerful oligopolies that maybe for about 20 to 30 years, they saw a tendency towards consolidation. In a world where consumers pick their bank based on who has the closest branch, then that has enormous synergies of consolidation. And that's what drove a lot of consolidation in all these markets to a market structure where you have 5 banks that own everything. And as in any market when you don't have competition, where you don't have alternatives, consumers end up overpaying for for services, and access ends up being way lower than it should be. So I think that was the market structure in, let's say, 2012, 2013. Very concentrated banks, some of the most profitable in the world, lower access to financial services. Even now, 250 million people in Latin America have no access, and some of the highest interest rates in the world. For Brazil, only Malawi and Zimbabwe have higher rates than Brazil. And so what happened is technology and internet and smartphone just fundamentally changed that landscape. When you go from stop deciding who your bank is going to be based on who has the closest branch, to deciding who your bank is going to be based on who's giving you the best prices and the best experience, and technology is lowering barriers to entry and is fundamentally make these markets more efficient, then that opens up a huge window of disaggregation, of fragmentation of the market. So in our view, we are starting a new phase of 25 years of fragmentation of the banking market. There was this first wave of consolidation, now a new wave of fragmentation begins, which ultimately is just phenomenal for consumers. It means more competition, it means more alternatives, it means lower prices, it means lower interest rates. And I think what really created that was technology, and a lot of technology and smartphones becoming at a certain place in some of these markets make it possible. And then frankly, a little bit of just entrepreneurs questioning that status quo. One of the things that we heard a lot in 2012 and 2013 in Brazil was, I'm originally from Colombia, and people in Brazil tell me, David, forget it. You cannot go compete with the big banks. These are the most powerful companies in Brazil. They're going to crush you. The regulator is not going to let you. There is a lot of regulation. You can't do it. There's just a ton of conventional wisdom, not only in Brazil, but really globally, that financial services was almost like this sacred industry that was reserved for these 5 banks. And what has happened is that we and a lot of entrepreneurs in the region been breaking that conventional wisdom and been showing that being a small startup with technology, with a better culture, focusing on the consumer in this new world, and if there is access to capital, then that's a huge advantage versus the big banks that have a really hard time actually moving and innovating. So I think it's a combination of technology, that conventional wisdom finally being broken down, and then obviously capital entering into a region. And maybe that's actually an interesting question for you, Bill, at that point. How is the funding market? Why do you think the funding market has fundamentally changed in Latin America? Because 6 years ago, you never really heard much big funds really investing in the region. Now you guys were some of the early ones in Latin America, but obviously almost every month there is a new big venture capital fund investing in Latin America.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of, it's a bit of a circular story, and I'm not sure what exactly the spark was, but I think it starts with what you were talking about. I mean, I think you've got a market that is offering customers really high pricing and really poor service, and technology gives the opportunity to disrupt that. And so the ability for companies that really have great user experience, great technology, great analytics, just can grow so much faster here than we see in developed markets, right? So probably 60% of what QED does is in the U.S. And if a company is growing at 2x or 2.5x, it's really impressive. I don't know, what was your best year? 7x, 10x, something like that. We see commonly within fintech or prop tech or kind of related places, companies routinely growing 3, 4x for multiple years in a row. Just the ability, once you find the right situation of good user experience, more reasonable prices, consumers are just willing to flock to it. I'm sure you guys all know this, but whether it's Brazilians or Mexicans or whomever, just the willingness to embrace technology, the willingness for building services on top of WhatsApp that everybody uses and allows things to just go viral. I mean, you guys have one of the most viral businesses we've ever seen, kind of in any business, much less financial services, where the vast majority of your customers are getting referred in by other customers. And just the willingness to engage in social media, the willingness to engage in digital tools is really high for Brazilians, for Mexicans, and all throughout the continent. And so I think investors see that. And I think 6-7 years ago, there weren't quite the success stories to look at. I mean, you had, certainly Mercado Libre had made great progress, but you didn't really see all of the success stories. And now you have Nubank that's grown to, well over 10 million customers and growing incredibly quickly. You've got a number of other firms that are, maybe not quite unicorns yet, but, $400, $500, $600, $700 million valuations. It's catching the eye of a number of large international firms. I mean, we all know about SoftBank and them entering the market, with a lot of splash and, doing a number of deals really quickly. But it's not, just SoftBank. I mean, Excel's been active, Tiger's been active, DST, Ribbit, QED, Andreessen. And so because of the characteristics of what David described as what's going on in the market potential, combined with seeing a number of success stories. I mean, I think, seeing PagSeguro and Stone go public and realizing, look, there is a clear demonstrated monetization path for some of the large companies out here, has people just excited. And I also think being a U.S. investor and investing in the U.S., when some entrepreneur comes up with an idea, if they start getting traction, 3 months later, there's 10 copycats that are instantly there. I've been telling people for a while, from my outside view, it's really hard to start businesses down here. It's easier now than it was probably when you started 5-6 years ago, but it's really hard to start businesses in Latin America for a whole bunch of reasons. And so when you find an entrepreneur that has a great idea, gets early traction, yes, once they get successful, there will be competitors and there will be people copying it, but it's not as rapid as it is in the U.S. We see many spaces have 2 or 3 really credible companies, whereas in San Francisco, you often see 10. So I think there's a number of different characteristics why, we see the market as attractive. We also, the last point I would make is we also see a number of local firms that helps a lot. So the number of reputable local firms that can be on the ground and can help with things that by definition, American and international firms can't really help with, I think really helps the ecosystem as well. So David, one other question for you. I mean, there's a number of companies that have taken advantage of this great funding environment, none like Nubank. I mean, you guys definitely lead the pack in terms of, actual traction in the market, certainly market hype, the taking advantage of all these trends. What makes Nubank special, and why have you guys been able to do this when so many people have made progress but haven't gotten to your point?
I think it's a couple of things. First one is a very attractive market. So always we'll start thinking about the market because, as I said, it's hard to build a large company in a small market. So financial services is as big as it gets. But then a couple of things I think we were able to do well. The first one was, since the very beginning, since we had a few slides, we had a very clear view of the culture of Nubank, what the culture was going to be. We continue to think, especially as we grow and as we scale and as we go more countries, as we hire more people, continue to find how is probably the investment that pays off more. It is early investing in the culture and building a really great culture for a number of different reasons. First one, because consumers actually buy your culture. They don't buy your product. And this is something that becomes every day more clear. Now that everybody's trying to compete with us, now that the big banks have launched competitors, they have good apps, they have good cards, consumers get in touch with them, they get in touch with us, they just know where they want to go. They know where they want to bank. And it's because they want to get in touch with us and they talk to our customer service team or they use our products, they realize that we're fundamentally a different company. So first is, if you have a consumer-centric culture, which in a market like financial services, where the biggest pain is there in the consumer frustration, the consumer anxiety, then a good culture that is consistent with the strategy has become super important. The second is, I think it's become clear that talent and just qualified talent, especially in a region like Latin America, is our number one bottleneck. It's not capital. Capital is there. Capital is readily available. More funds are coming in every day. But I wish I could transform capital into talented people. That transformation doesn't really happen. We had to open an office in Berlin, in Germany, where we have 25 nationalities, people from 25 nationalities that we brought over to Sao Paulo. We are looking at opening a number of different offices. it is the thing that I spend the most amount of my time is figuring out how we attract the type of world-class talent that we need to attract. And the problem in Latin America is that there are still no necessarily world-class technology companies that have come out of the region. If you are in Silicon Valley, starting a startup, you can find somebody, a VP of engineering from Google, and hire somebody from product from Facebook, and find machine learning engineers from great companies. There is a lot of DNA that moves from company to company. If you're in Sao Paulo, you're in Mexico City, that best sharing of practices doesn't really happen. We're very isolated. And to really go where we want to go, you need that type of world-class talent in almost every single function. We just brought our chief people officer from California. People say it didn't make any sense. People is very local. She doesn't even speak Portuguese. That was absolutely one of the best hires I think we've done, because we see ourselves more of an international company in a global company than necessarily a Brazilian company. So I would say good culture allows you to bring people, retain that talent, and ultimately that is your number one bottleneck. And so that's why I call it the early investment culture is what keeps paying up. And then I think it is just really execution. I think we've been managed to launch the product, scale the product. Our first product was a credit card, which obviously has credit risk. And we launched in 2013 as Brazil was going in the worst economic recession in 100 years. From a macro perspective, it was absolutely the worst economic environment to be launching Nubank. And we were giving a lot of new people credit lines, expecting them to pay back. So getting credit wrong would have been easy. Growing, as a lot of you probably know, growing very fast, giving people money is super easy. You'll find 1 million customers waiting to get money from you. The hard thing is actually knowing who to give credit and how to collect and how to underwrite. And so that's where, frankly, QD has been super helpful. But having been able to build all those capabilities since the very beginning, the credit understanding, having been patient a lot with seeing how the business has evolved, building the right technology, building our own infrastructure. I think in financial services, you need to own a lot of your own infrastructures to really be able to scale for the long run. You cannot depend on third parties. A lot of the third parties, when we started scaling, we felt that a lot of the third parties that we started working with, it was almost like every single day there were issues with them that we couldn't control. And ultimately, our consumers were suffering, and we couldn't go to our consumers and say, sorry, it wasn't us, it was our partner. So anyway, there was a lot of very early stage investment in what we called owning our own destiny, which was building our own infrastructure. We built our own core banking system. We built our own processor. We built our own, we got our own banking license. We just felt that we needed to own all the entire stack to be on solid grounds to build the type of company we wanted to build. So maybe long way to answer your question, it was big part around was execution, and a lot of the execution was strong investment in technology and owning our own destiny.
No, that's great. Thank you. As I said, we've got maybe 11 minutes left. I'd love to open it up to the audience. If there's questions you'd like to ask, I think there's a couple folks out there that have microphones that if you stand up and raise your hand, they can come to, or we can pass you one of ours.
You were mentioning talent is a big bottleneck for you. What type of talent? Is it tech talent? Is it fintech biz talent? Is it a combination of both? That on that front, and on the owning your stack, does that mean maybe insourcing the tech and nearshoring, or you think of outsourcing and offshoring? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think talent, for sure, engineering, software engineers always comes number one. That is the absolutely hardest. But then product management, product managers. There's not great product management as Silicon Valley really understands world-class product management. It's hard to find that type of talent of expertise even in Latin America. Data science, we find great statisticians, we find really great mathematicians, but few people have used a lot of really know in Latin America how to put sophisticated algorithms and then build machine learning infrastructure to be able to run models real time. Everybody talks about data science. Very few people are actually really putting sophisticated algorithms real time to make decisions in a lot of these areas. Very, very hard, harder than always people acknowledge that it is. And then we find good designers, but increasingly to manage a good design function or research function, we had to bring people from the US. And so I would say product engineering, data science, design tends to be sort of the biggest pain in terms of talent. In terms of owning the stack, it is possible we've exaggerated in trying to build everything ourselves. Absolutely, you never know the counterfactual, right? It's absolutely possible that we built some things in-house that we shouldn't have, that we should have used third party. But we just went all the way to build everything in-house. We build our core banking system in-house. We build our processor in-house. We do not depend on any third-party firms. We're building all of it on our own infrastructure. We obviously are fully on the cloud. But when we see ourselves as a technology company. We don't see ourselves as a bank. And a technology company doesn't outsource technology, right? Imagine Amazon outsourcing their app development, or Amazon outsourcing their web, or their so we've always found that both the back end as well as the front end is the core of what we do. And so outsourcing any of that part of development to a third-party firm always seemed to us like we were outsourcing the core functionality or the core part of what we were building.
Well, if I can just chime in, I mean, if you look at banks, one of the biggest problems that banks have is that they have 38 systems that barely talk to each other. And, if I can use one example of, Nubank started life as a credit card company and, after a few years launched a banking product. I mean, how long does it take one of your customers to get a new Konto? 2 seconds? 2 seconds, literally push a button on the app, it's done. I mean, banks can't do that because their systems don't talk to each other, and Nubank would never have been able to do that had they not built the systems. When I started working with David and they talked about how they're building their own banking system and processor, I literally told you guys you were crazy. Why would anyone ever do that? No one ever does that. You did it, it worked, and now you've really got the benefits because you've been able to build this as, you've built modules so you can adjust them, but they all talk to each other, they all work to each other, and just the ability to cross-sell and manage great customer experiences across products is amazing.
And it's obviously a great cost advantage because, ultimately we think that a lot of the financial products will commoditize, and there will be an advantage to have a very, very low cost structure. We think that we need to be super efficient so we can pass that efficiency to our end consumers. That's how we make some banking products completely viable without charging any fees. And so you need to own a lot of that stack to give you the efficiency to be able to pass that efficiency to end consumers at the end of the day. So it's an advantage that goes both ways, both from a cost perspective as well as speed and ability to develop new products.
Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thank you.
For being here with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.